Hello and welcome to the Syndicated Vomit Podcast, an extension of all the Vomit series of podcasts. My name is Mac Taylor, here to continue our motherfucking journey that we started on the last podcast, which is our trek through Power Rangers, from Mighty Morphin all the way to the new Dino Fury. Very, very excited to keep going down this road. I'm never not in the mood to watch Power Rangers. I can always do that. Anytime my nieces and nephews are down to watch that, I'm all in. I'm all ears for the Power Rangers. Today we're going to be covering episodes 5 through 8. From the good, the bad, the ugly, the cheesy, the fantastic, the tokusatsu. All the business. So we start with episode 5, Different Drum. So Kimberly, one of her, thousands of jobs that these kids go through Mighty Morphin, she is teaching a dance class. And Ernie and Billy are like dancing along, being kind of goofy, and Ernie knocks Billy into a physical gag where he like slides out and then does like a pratfall. It was a nice stunt fall. He does like a tuck and roll. Like it's not like Jason where he does like a front flip into it. Like he actually kind of does a very nice fall. Like lands pretty good on the back. Like I was like, damn, that was a pretty nice fall. And Rita has this thing, which is an odd thing for a villain to do, which is she'll just watch what the Rangers are doing, and will try to base a monster of the week on what they're doing. So in this case, they're dancing. It's just like, oh, you like dancing and music, do you? Well, I'll make a music monster. And it's like, really? You have to do that? Or should you just make really badass monsters to, destroy the Power Rangers? It doesn't have to be ironic in the victory. It could just be a victory. But this is probably why Rita Repulsa just never wins. So she's talking about that, and Billy's talking about liking dance, and his terminology that Trini explains is I believe he says like the vibrations and the movements intrigue me, but my appendages don't comply. I think it was around what he said. First of all, no one talks like that. Like not even tech geeks and book nerds speak that way. That's not something people typically. Who says appendages? Like who the fuck? Like not even talking about high schoolers, but I'm talking about like anyone in the world. How many times in your life have you used the word appendage? I, in this podcast, have said the word appendage more times than I've probably said my entire life. So it's just like I know he's the token. Like they're really trying to make like the stereotypical whatever. So we got the stereotypical nerd. So he talks in ways people don't understand. But it's like that they don't really do that. But again, this is a kids show in 1993, which is 3 years before I was even born. So we'll give it a little bit of a break. So Kimberly's trying to help because there's a deaf girl, and she accidentally bumps into another girl, and she's like, "Hey, watch it! Why don't you?" And it's like kind of a dick move, And Kimberly's like, "Oh, it's my bad. I didn't sign it and everything." So like, we have to just reiterate how good of a person the Power Rangers are. So like, not only is she teaching a dance class, but she's helping deaf people dance. Like, you got to get that extra little bit. But it's not just like for that though. Like the deaf girl whose name I don't think I wrote down, and they don't really say it a whole lot. Yeah, I don't think I got it down, but she's actually relevant to the plot of the episode, so that's actually pretty rare. And Rita is always like interrupting shit Finster's doing, to tell him to make something that's completely different. Because he's like, I'm working on this really gruesome monster that smells like fish. And she's like, forget that. Make the music monster. And he's like, how about a fire-breathing hedgehog? And I was like, that would be badass. Totally make a fire-breathing hedgehog. That sounds totally Japanese. Do the fuck out of that. But they don't. I would have loved to have seen that. It would have been an interesting episode with a fire-breathing hedgehog. Back at the dance class, Bulk and Skull arrive to be Bulk and Skull, to be dicks, and to be made fun of. So Bulk and Skull come, and they're messing with Bulk and Skull come. I bet they do. And Bulk gets into a dance-off with Zach and splits his pants again. Because Zach actually does dance really well. But he splits his pants, but like in the next shot when he's falling over, because he goes to like do a spin and he falls over the counter, like pies himself in the face, his pants are like, intact. Like you hear like the ripping sound, but I guess they couldn't afford a second pair of pants to rip like they did in the other episode. So they're like, you know what? Make the sound effect no one's going to notice except for a 24-year-old man-child who has watched these episodes more than once. So that happens. And then we meet our Monster of the Week, Gnarly Gnome, who is just a gnome with an accordion. Pretty lame Monster of the Week. Like I said, I will be doing a ranking video, but like, come on. Gnarly Gnome. It's kind of dumb. And what Gnarly Gnome does is he plays his accordion and turns all the girls into zombies. Not the George A. Romero flesh-eating zombies, but like the early 30s and 40s movie where people are just, slaves. Those zombies. Although that would be very interesting if in this episode they were turned into flesh-eating zombies and the Power Rangers had to stop flesh-eating that. You know what? We need to make that. That needs to be a thing. Dino Fury, you need to have zombies. It's part of today's pop culture with the kids and the Call of Duty. Do it. Duty. So every girl is turned into a zombie in that dance class except the deaf girl, because for once being deaf had its up, because she can not be hypnotized by the Gnarly Gnome and get help. And like using music to lure in children is like, I just watched Hocus Pocus on Halloween, so I was like, that's exactly what the fuck they did in Hocus Pocus. So it was a very witchcraft, because Rita is supposed to be a witch of sort, so that is definitely a witch move. It needs to be a hashtag, witch move. And then we cut to, because, the deaf girl's trying to get help, and Jason is at the bar, at the juice bar, lifting weights. And I'm like, why are you lifting weights while sitting at the counter? Like, wouldn't you just go into the weight area? It's just an odd thing to do. Like, I'm going to talk to someone at a bar and just, like, curl while I do it. It's a very odd choice. So she tells Jason... she writes down on a piece of paper for him, and he's sent into action. And meanwhile, back with the zombie girls, Gnarly Gnome just has them dancing. He's like, "Oh, make sure to dance for Rita." And it's like, why? Okay, you have mind control over people, and your go-to is to have them dance. And he has Babu and Squat cooking for him. And so they dance, have a feast, and he's like, I'm going to take a nap. And I'm like, wait a minute, weren't you just made to kidnap these kids and then, like, drop them off to Rita? Like, you're taking a little too much time here, Gnarly Gnome. It was just a weird scene. Like, there are just sometimes when you're watching a show and you're like, man, that's just strange. Like, I even... in this world of teenagers morphing into superheroes and fighting Japanese rubber suit monsters, this is weird. a gnome with an accordion dancing with young girls. Ooh, that's a little weird. Young girls. While a monkey dude cooks food. It's a very weird scene. Not in a bad way, just very strange. So Rita's pissed that everybody's taking a nap. And we see the gnome tries to get away by turning invisible. I'm like, he can turn invisible? Why hasn't he done that yet? And you're thinking, is that going to show up later? Not really. It does, but it doesn't matter. And so the Rangers show up, and they tell the deaf girl, like, go over there by that bush. And then they morph because, you can't reveal your identity. It's just like any other superhero type of deal, except they make much less of a thing about it. Because the power, like, they all the time, and like Superman and, bad, like, they have to make a big deal about hiding your identity. Whereas in this, it's just kind of a sidebar thing for the most part, where it's like, if they're near people, they're like, oh, let me just run over here, change, and then do the Power Rangers thing. And then they go, yeah, those Power Rangers are great. Like, there's a little more down the road about their identities and whatnot, but, like, it really doesn't, it's not fully in your face. Like, usually it's just a thing when they're going on, like, when they send her to the bush, I'm like, oh, yeah, right, they do have to, like, not morph in front of people. So, it's interesting that they do keep it just sidebar. But, we only have, like, 20 minutes per episode, and you got to cram, like, set up to the story with the kids doing some activity that tends to be charitable. Rita make a monster. Monster shows up, causes some trouble. They morph into a suit. The monster gets big. They get the Megazord, defeat the monster, end the episode. That's a lot to do in 20 minutes. So they morph into action. They're beating up Gnarly Gnome because he's the fucking gnome. And they do their power weapons, and, every time that they combine the power weapons, it's everyone shouting out what their weapon is. And for some reason, it was different this time, because usually it's power sword, power lance, power daggers, power bow, power axe. Like, that's typically the lineup. But for some reason, this time, like, they tried something different, where it's Jason still has power sword, but then it's mighty mace, battle bow, dino daggers, and cosmic cannon. So a lot of, same letters starts. Same thing with the villains tend to have that too. So they do that. They blow up the gnome, but Rita makes her monster grow. And so they go to tank mode. That clearly never fucking works. Tank mode just doesn't work. Like, just go straight to the Megazord. Like, why are you doing this half-assed coagulative robot thing? Just fucking get to the Megazord and fucking win. So they go to the Megazord power. But the gnome's accordion, he's playing it, trying to use it, and I don't know if it's really he turns invisible, but like from the way the scene looks, it looks like he turns into a rock or a building, and they just hit him anyway. So it's like he's like, am I a rock? And then they just hit him, and then he's blah. And so, like, it was really pointless that they threw that. It's like they had to be like, oh yeah, he does have powers. Let's shoehorn that shit in there. So it's not just, quick. We got to have like another 45 seconds to fill. So then they do the power slash. They get the Megazord sword, power slash, bring us home. And Ernie gives good job sodas because the deaf girl helped save the day, and they're all talking about how cool those Power Rangers are. And Jason's trying to sign, and she's like, yeah, you're not getting it right at all. And the deaf girl flirts with Billy. Like, she gets him on the dance floor, and he does okay. I mean, they have him go over the top and break dance and stuff, but we don't need that. But there was like a kind of a genuine little connection there, and I'm like, this could have been a thing. Like, I know we don't have a progressive story because it's episodic for television needs at the time. But if we were going to do a continuing story, she should have been Billy's girlfriend at some point, and we should have had that relationship develop and him having to hide his Ranger identity and all that business, like, that could have been good. That could have been real good stuff there. Just saying, what could have been. And that brings us into episode 6, Food Fight. So they're having a food drive, essentially, for the daycare center. So again, another fucking thing they shoehorned in their schedule somehow. And Bulk and Skull are helping, like, by force. I don't know how. Like, they must have owed somebody something. But they're begrudgingly helping. And Rita's sick, and she's tired of seeing the food. So, that the food's going to be a theme because, Rita mentioned it. Bulk and Skull also, they have that rando girl that I mentioned a couple episodes ago, like that chick punk. And they also have another guy in their group as well. So they actually have, like, a group. I'm used to just seeing Bulk and Skull together, and that's it. So, like, but there's 4 of them in this one. And they want to start a food fight, so they start throwing pies, except Bulk ends up hitting Skull and not the person he was intending to hit. And a full-out food fight breaks out. Like, really, like, craft services must have been pissed, because they made all this food. It got thrown everywhere. And, yeah, that was pretty crazy shit. So then Rita's like, they want a food fight. So she makes a monster called Pudgy Pig, who was one of my favorite Mighty Morphin early villains, because he's just a little pig, like a round pig with arms and legs and a Roman helmet. Very simple design, but he's adorable. And he talks like, I'm hungry, and he just basically fucking eats. That's his thing. He just eats a whole bunch of fucking food. That is his whole shtick. He's adorable. So she sends Pudgy Pig down. And Jason's trying to end the food fight, so he uses Frank's as nunchucks for some reason, but it works, because Bulk drops a pie on himself. Like, Bulk never hits anyone but himself or Skull with the food fight. But then Pudgy arrives at a picnic, so, like, I guess Yogi Bear wasn't there, because now Pudgy Pig is there, eating in picnic baskets. And Bulk is, like, running around with, like, whipped cream cans, like, spraying it, but, like, he's got the turned up. And I don't know if you've ever used a whipped cream can before, but, like, you have to turn it upside down, or at least at an angle, to get the whipped cream to come out. So you can't just run. He's just releasing air. So, like, when they go to stop him, it's like, he wasn't really making much of a mess anyway. But nevertheless, he needs to be stopped from wasting all this whipped cream that he's not actually using. So they send him into the punch bowl, and the principal, and his very messed up toupee, blames this on the Rangers. Like, you guys you ruined the food drive. You're gonna clean this up. And I'm like, why are you yelling at them? Bulk and Skull clearly start. You saw them start it. And the Rangers just tried to stop it. You're lucky they got it done. I don't know what the problem is. It's a very strange a flex. And when he yells at them, he says, it's ruined. He doesn't say ruined. He says it's ruined. So I wrote that down just because I wanted to continuously say it's ruined. And now from now on in a podcast, if something is ruined, it's ruined. So yeah, it's weird that he always blames the Rangers for shit. Like in the couple episodes ago, he blamed them on the mess in the hallway that Bulk and Skull made, and was like, "You guys are cleaning this up." It's like, but why them though? They started the fundraiser. They were doing charitable shit. But the cleanup's postponed because they got to get to Zordon, and I see this this clearly Japanese stock footage scene because it's a Japanese market, like the lettering on the buildings in Japanese. Pudgy Pig is eating a fucking supermarket. Like, you need to get down there and stop Pudgy Pig. So they morph into action, and Pudgy eats the power weapons. And he also farts a lot too, but like I'm sure it was a lot more heavy in the Japanese version. But like as he's eating, he's also farting, so he must have like. But also he's just a little ball, so I guess his digestive system is very small in comparison. Works very fast. He has the cleanest colon. And he puts Rangers in a vortex that sends him back, I guess. And he attacks a festival, scaring off Bulk and Skull. And we learn that he hates spicy food because he didn't touch the spicy food. So and then we had a plan to put the spicy food near Pudgy Pig. And at this point, because things are being a little more successful than usual, Finster's got a bit of an ego about him. He's like, haha, my monster. I won't answer Rita when she calls me because I made that monster. So Fudgy is... Fudgy? Oh boy, that'd be a completely different monster. Pudgy is heading to a food plant, and the Rangers morph back over to him and feed him a sub with all this spicy plant stuff in it. And he pukes up all the power weapons and gets his ass whooped. And they combined the power weapons, beating Pudgy Pig's ass. Just with the power weapons. He doesn't grow. And Finster is crushed that his creation didn't even make Megazord. Fucking gnarly gnome got the Megazord. We get another toupee gag with the principal. And he accidentally eats the spicy sub, but still was like, hey, not bad. And they all do that. At the end of every episode, just about something happens, usually with Bulk and Skull, that makes everybody laugh. And there's like that very prolonged group laughter. It's very uncomfortable. Where everyone's just like, ha, 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 and then the credits start rolling. I hate that. It's like early Degrassi episodes where, like, we don't always need to end shit the same way, you know? We don't have to pause and then go to the credits. Like, shit can just fade out. Doesn't need to, like, pause and then roll the credits up the still image. Like, we can just fucking cut to black, then do the fucking credits. You know, we don't have to do it the same way. That brings us to episode 7, Big Sisters, where Kim and Trini have another fucking charitable task with being in the Big Sister program. And they're little. Every time I hear that, I always think of role models. They're little. Turned up the heat in the men's shower, caused a little bit of trouble. And she's like, well, I just wanted attention. Like, you don't have to do bad things to get attention. Ya hear that, kids? You don't have to be dicks. If you be nice, people might show you attention too. Like, it was a very, like, shoehorned after school special moment. And I was like, God damn it. We don't need that business. It was a bit corny. And then we get to the setup to the episode is that Rita is after the power eggs. Gotta have power in that title. And the power eggs can only be opened by a child. So it's a good thing that Trini and Kimberly just happened to be hanging out with a child this one time. So Rita says, send me a child napping monster. Oh boy, that's not exactly the best thing to ask for. Alright, there's a lot of those running around the streets as is. So she orders chunky chicken. Chunky chicken. Which is just chicken with scissors. It's a chicken with scissors. Yeah, when we talk about cool Power Rangers villains like Bones, Pudgy Pig, This is not one of them. I'll take gnarly gnome over chunky fucking chicken. So very, very dumb monster. And so Trini and Kimberly are like, do you like boys? And she's like, boys are gross. Again, I don't like this. Usually the after school special side plot, they have to get in there because it's, that's, the times. I don't mind it, But this one, I don't know why it pisses me off. It just did. And I was just very ready for this episode. I didn't like the monster of the week, and I didn't like the actual plot that was going on. So it was just across the board. I was like, oh, fuck this episode. The putties show up, and she's like, what do they want? And Trini and Cameron are like, get behind us. And they just beat putty ass. But then the putties take the little girl anyway. And I'm like, why did you need a monster nabbing girl, a girl nabbing monster, when the putties did a good job of doing that by themselves? I don't know how the chicken really plays out in this. And at this point, actually, Goldar's voice isn't as deep or as like it was in the first couple episodes. But it still hasn't reached my classic Goldar voice that I love yet. But we're somewhere in the middle, so it's getting better. But it could be better too, and I can't wait till we get to that because I love that Goldar so much. So Zach and the boys are about to eat this massive fucking sundae. It made me really want some ice cream, but instead. They find out their communicators aren't working. And Kim says dumb shit all the time. Like, all the time, Kim is saying dumb shit. Like, usually when they're getting in the Megazord, they all say, like, Zach, here online, Trini, ready to go. And she'll always say something that has nothing to do with what they're saying. She'll be like, Kimberly here, look at this radio. I'm like, there's no radio in the Megazord, first of all. You're not in it long enough to listen to music. Except for the Power Rangers theme, it only plays Go-Go Power Rangers. And if that's the case, you really need an elaborate stereo for that. Or she'll say, like, that monster's ugly. And it's like, but it didn't. It's just odd. And she says a lot of dumb shit, like when she, in the first episode, when they're like, are you ready to be a Power Ranger? She's like, no. Not. And I'm like, oh my god, don't you ever fucking say that. So she says a lot of dumb 90s shit like that, right? And sometimes it just, and in an episode I already wasn't enjoying all that much, it stuck out to me more. So then we're introduced to the Rad Bug, which is basically Billy's magic school bus for the Power Rangers. It's a flying car, even though their communicators teleport them to Zordon, but the communicators aren't working, so we got to take a car. And then Zordon tells them about the Morphing Masters. Again, got to have those double letters. That they hid the power eggs in the middle of the ocean, and can only be opened by a child. And I'm like, okay, you've known this the whole time. Why did you not tell these kids? Like, there's so much shit that you seem to already know that could be kind of helpful down the road, and you never fucking tell them until right before shit gets real. Zordon, be better at communication. And so they're like, well, we have to drive the car because we don't want them to see us coming. I'm like, what is the point of even having the flying car if you're not going to fly it? That'd be like in the Magic School Bus. Miss Frizzle was like, hey, let's just fucking walk, guys. You cool with that? No! We have a flying magic school bus. Let's get in the fucking flying magic school bus. So they morph into action and quickly knock the eggs back to the ocean. So that whole, like, the power eggs could have been like a thing. Like, if Rita gets her hands on it, I'm like, shit could get real. Never fucking, just in a couple of seconds. Like, we show up, knock those eggs in the ocean, then continue on because we still have a chicken who did not kidnap the child. The putties kidnapped the child. So the chicken has been very useless, and it's also really stupid. So the chicken goes to fight them, and they just fuck it up. Goldar is fighting them better than the chunky chicken. And the girl, Maria is her name, is like hanging by string, and the chicken's threatening to cut the string with its scissors. That is the only usefulness it has, is to cut shit with. But you could have just bought a pair of scissors and not had this chicken. So they get the Megazord and catch the girl when Chunky Chicken cuts her rope. And it's a very cheap-looking giant. It looks like it's made out of like wood and a tarp. Like, you could very easily see this is not a great effect. But hey, it's got the charm to it. Like, at least they made a giant sword hand, because nowadays that'd be CG, and I'm glad that they fucking tried, you know? So the Rad Bud takes her away, so I'm like, okay, she gets to go in the flying car, but we all had to just fucking drive it? And then, so, the chicken starts to, like, instant transmission. I'm like, are those magic scissors? And if so, why can they only do that? Like, it was a weird thing. Like, they never fucking said it could do this before. So it was like, pew, pew, pew. It was like Goku and Dragon Balls. It was going around. But then they just do the power slash with the Megazord. Fucking game over. And everyone's talking about the amazing Power Rangers. I'm like, all right, that's really too close to Spider-Man, guys. Like, you couldn't call them, they're the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. You could have called them the Mighty Power Rangers. Or that'd be like calling them, like, the Uncanny Power Rangers. Like, it's like, come on, guys, really? And Maria, she's like talking about how she's the popular girl in her class because she met the Power Rangers. And I'm like, no, kids don't believe that shit. She could say, like, I met the Power Rangers, and they'll be like, your mom's a whore and your dad's dead. And because kids are dicks like that, and they have no sense of holding shit in. So that's how that would have went. And Bulk, who has not been in the episode, like, we haven't not had any Bulk and Skull shenanigans. He's just sitting there, drinking a smoothie or eating ice cream or something, and they drop chili on him. And they're like, oops, sorry, Bulk. But it's like, you know, I understand him getting his comeuppance in the other episodes, but he wasn't doing shit. He wasn't even in this episode. It's like they wrote the episode, filmed most of it, and were like, shit, we forgot to put Bulk and Skull in here. So just sit him over there, and we're going to dump chili on him. That'll be funny. It was just a little fucking mean-spirited for the show normally, and also just made no sense. This whole episode, just strike it from the books. I did not like it. Which brings us to an episode I did enjoy, and the final episode we'll be talking about on today's episode. Episode 8, I Guy. That is the letter I Guy. So Billy is basically mentoring Willie. Yeah, couldn't have named the kid fucking Walter or Jonathan or Timmy. Did it have to be Willie? First of all, that's a dick term. 2, Willie and Billy. Really? Kind of dumb. But Willie is made the 90s version of virtual reality, riding a roller coaster. And Kim's like, oh, get me off this thing. And I'm like, it's not that fucking good, okay? You know, You calm the fuck down. It's not that brilliant. There's wind blowing and shit. You're just looking at something. You're fine. But 93 virtual reality is pretty cutting edge shit. And Rita is like, wow, that kid's really smart. We should kidnap him and use his brain. And I'm like, why are you so focused? That is the 3rd episode in 8 episodes you've tried to kidnap a child. And in 1 episode, you kidnap teenagers. Why? Why is that the go-to? Why don't you just take Billy? He's got a brain. Leave Willie alone. Yeah, see, that sounds fucking awful. And Willie has 0 self-esteem. He's like, "Are they really gonna like my invention?" And Billy's like, "You need to be more confident in yourself." Ugh. So the putties attack, and Willie's like, "My invention! Don't hurt my invention!" And Billy has to save the invention while beating off putties. Oh, wait a minute, that sounded horrible. He's not sitting there jerking off, which wouldn't that have been interesting? He has to jerk off all the putties to finish to save Willie's invention. That's just maybe because I keep saying Willie. I immediately went to a fucking masturbation joke. Anyway, let's start that over with. He fights off all the putties, saves his invention, and then we meet the monster of the week, Eye Guy, who is great at kidnapping children, but it's like his design doesn't really state why, but he traps people in his giant eye, and that's also his weak point, is the giant fucking eye that could be disconnected from his body at certain points, right? But it's a cool design. It's just a bunch of eyeballs surrounding a giant center eye. It's an interesting design. It looks cool. It's a lot better than fucking Chunky Chicken or Gnarly Gnome or any of that dumb shit. So Bulk and Skull arrive, and they're like, "There's nerds in this science convention." It's like, yeah, that is literally what makes up a science fair. I don't know if you've ever actually been to one, guys. So, like, you know what? Let's mess with them. And so Skull finds his gun that disintegrates Bulk's pants. So Bulk threatens him, but Jason's like, "You really gonna threaten people?" So he's like, "All right, not gonna fight." But also, Bulk has denim, like a denim vest, over a leather jacket. And I was like, I know it's the 90s, but like, was that a thing? Denim and leather together? It's kind of fucking weird. And Zach and Jason, they beat up Bulk and Skull. And Billy wheels him out. And they put him in this girl's fashion machine that basically makes them dress like women. And Bulk just looks like somebody's mom in his dress and purse. He kind of looks like someone's mom. So they run away because they're like, "No, we're girls." 90s stuff. And because of that, the judge is like, "Willie, you're disqualified." I'm like, why? What is it with adults in this show and blaming people who literally have nothing to do with situations for situations happening? Willie wasn't involved whatsoever with the situation. He didn't start shit. He didn't say anything. He just watched it happen. And it's like you see someone stab someone, and a cop walks up and points to you and said, "You're going to jail for murder." And you're like, "But I wasn't. I just saw this happen." And he's like, "Exactly. You're going to jail." And it's like, "But what? I don't understand. What about the guy that stabbed the guy?" That's what happens with adults in the show. So Willie is disqualified. Again, no reason. And he's crushed, as you would be. And the Eye Guy shows up and takes Willie, and he's in like that like astronaut space gyrosphere kind of deal in the eye, which is an odd thing to have in an eye. And also when they show Eye Guy, like when Rita's like, look how good Eye Guy is at capturing kids. It's clearly just the Sentai footage because this is a Japanese girl getting kidnapped. So, it's fun to try to pick out what's stock footage. I mean, obviously all the Ranger suit stuff and the monster stuff is pretty much stock footage. But, like, you try to sometimes pick it out. It's fun to notice little shit like that. So Willie's been captured. And the Rangers find his lucky cap because he wears one of those like steam like paperboy caps with like overalls and a striped shirt. Like it's definitely the 90s, okay? They go to the viewing globe for exposition. And you got to get that main eye. So they morph into action. They kind of have an interesting thing where you're seeing like Eye Guy's eye, the Rangers through Eye Guy's eyes reflections and shit. It's like there was an interesting kind of camera technique for a low budget show. And so they combine the power weapons immediately. And they blow him up into a bunch of eyes, and then he just regenerates because you have to take out the main eye. Zordon fucking told you. You knew this shit. So Billy goes looking for the main eye, and when he shows up to it, you could see the Japanese girl. From the stock footage. Again. Because that's the only footage they had of the main eye and the Blue Ranger. But it was just, like, weird. It was like, who's this kid? So Billy takes out the main eye, and then Rita makes her monster grow, which reverses it. So now the big eye is, again, back, and now much, much bigger. So they go to tank mode, and that never fucking works. Stop going to tank mode and go straight to the Megazord sequence. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to keep doing this thing that never fucking works. So they shoot the eye, into the eye pieces, and that doesn't work. So they power slash the main eye and fucking blow up Eye Guy. He's gone, taking us home. And Willie, he's like, wow, I got to meet the Power Rangers. And he goes back, and the judge, who was a dick to him for no reason, is like, hey, we saw your VR thing. It's great. And he's like, awesome. And he's like, you're in the science fair. And he's like, great. And he's like, and you got first place. And he's like, oh, this day, everything magically solved itself. And then Bulk and Skull show up because, like, we want our clothes back, and they hand them. They're like, we had to dry them first, and they're literally like little tiny baby clothes. And you know what? If you dressed your babies up as Bulk and Skull, you get bonus points. And like I said, that episode was so much better because I really, really disliked Big Sisters, so I was really happy to see Eye Guy, which is one of the monsters I remember from my childhood. So I was like, yeah, Eye Guy episode, yes. So that covers episodes 5 through 8. Guys, it's been a blasty blast. I'm loving my morphin' journey with you guys. Stay tuned next time. We're going to do episodes 9 through 12. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification and all that business. And also, most importantly, guys, stay safe and stay nerdy.